meeting.
I'd like to call this meeting to order for Tuesday, April 20th. First thing on the agenda is a moment of silence, so we'll observe a moment of silence before we start. Okay, thank you. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Lori.
That would be Heather.
Stendor. Jennings.
Here.
Dylan Jennings.
I'm here.
Berlin. Mike Berlin. Corpola.
Here.
Mika.
Here.
Vitek.
Here.
Huber.
Here.
Pennanen.
Here.
Wiener.
Here.
Schutte.
Here.
Merdig.
Here.
Negro.
Here.
Mackenzie.
Here.
Quebec.
Here.
Etzinger.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Cabasa.
Here.
Kinney.
Here.
Ortman.
Here.
Franek.
Here.
Hufall.
Here.
And again is Mike Berlin present.
Here. He just walked in.
Perfect, thank you. All 21 present.
Next, we need a motion to adopt the agenda.
This is Supervisor Ortman. I'll make that motion.
Schutte first it and Ortman second.
Moody, seconded by Ortman. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Go into the public comment period. Anyone from the public wish to comment?
Now
Okay.
come on up, David. We do have a public comment in the audience here. Introduce yourself and give your address, please.
I'm David Sederholm, Highbridge, Wisconsin, and I actually farm for a living and became a partner.
As close as you can.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm David Sederholm, Highbridge, Wisconsin, farm for a living, became a partner of an operation, and the operation was a 1904 railway. That's a trustee of the operation, and I wanted to present the idea here that if you would go on to a record or inform the Public Service Commission that the operation would like to reestablish that rail line as a tourist operation and eventually bring back freight. The problem is when you bring back freight, you run into more problems because the last predecessor or last individuals that were there were a freight operator. And as they run freight, there was a charter. And some of the charter mandated how you were going to conduct your business. They also sold it, or process of selling it, to an operation that has, the individuals that I'm with looked into it and they couldn't find well, like if you bought a house, you'd have a a footprint. None of them really have a footprint, although they own or lay title to a lot of the rail in this country that's not usable. Just a little footprint of this rail. It stretches from Ashland to Prentice, although they cut it a little short, but you still need 2 points of interest when you start and when you come. And I'm hoping that you individuals might sign in and just say, you know, why not give it a try again? It's a 150-year-old operation. I sure appreciate your time. I thank you very kindly.
Anyone else online or whatever for public comment? Hearing none, we'll close the public comment period. Regular agenda, approval of the March 9th, 2021 county board meeting. We have a motion. Bill?
Bill moves.
Pepe? Pepe seconded it.
Who is the second?
Pepe Kabasa.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye. Motion carried.
Aye.
Vaccine update. Mark?
Yeah, we have, as you know, we've been working through the vaccinations here in the Chequamegon Bay. We work on with a coordinated list between Bayfield County, Ashland County, Red Cliff, and Bad River. And we are working off one combined list where people register, and then it basically goes through and the organizations can share. So we're matching up vaccines with people, because sometimes there's a mismatch. Sometimes we have vaccination in our own people, and sometimes we have the opposite. We basically have, if you look at the chart here, we're at 40% of the population. And the gray area here in this chart is the under 16 age population, which is not eligible for vaccine at the current time. We're at 79% of the 65 and older individuals. Then naturally you can see the females are beating out the males. I don't know if that says something about us guys, but maybe that's why females live longer. So with that, I just have there's some links on the website that you can look at, their current vaccination status, the current case counts of the of COVID itself, and then hospital loads. We had a slight uptick in hospitalizations and COVID cases over the last few weeks. 3 weeks ago, when MMC, they do a lot of testing for pre-ops and other types of visits within the hospital. They had actually 0 cases came out of that 1 week out of a few hundred tests, and now they're back up to just getting some. So it is something that as a community, as a Chequamegon Bay, we would encourage people to continue even after vaccinations to wear their mask and socially distance, because I think part of it is the social norm and the expectation for people who can't get vaccinated due to other conditions. In addition, we are seeing new guidance coming out of CDC from Pfizer, especially. They're thinking there might be a booster that will be needed in 12 months. I'm not sure on Moderna. We are taking a temporary pause on Johnson & Johnson, as you've heard on the news, due to 6 cases of complications out of about 7 million applications. So we anticipate that will be brought back in, and maybe they might restrict or give guidance concerning that would be for people X age. It seems in our reading and the public health guidance is that these complications were over women, mostly over the age of 50. So we're looking for guidance at the end of this week on that. Liz, are you on the line? Okay. So anyway, it's just an update, no action. Are there any questions about this?
This is Supervisor Ortman, if I might.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you, Dick. So Clark, I've been following this, and I know you have too. There's this uptick in cases. I understand it's mostly the variants. Is that what you're seeing too? And what does that mean for us?
Yeah, so there's a number of different variants. As you well know, the tests that are being done here, when we do these tests at public health or your clinic or at MMC, that does not test for a variant. The sample itself has to be sent down to the medical lab down in Madison for them to do that. And so periodically they are directing counties and agencies to send in samples so they can track that. We do have one of the variants running around up here. It's the same one that's in Michigan. And so one of the issues that you'll see from this variant is that it tends to have it is more contagious, and it tends to have a slightly higher hospitalization rate for people that are younger. So your 30 to 50-year-olds versus the original variant had a higher hospitalization rate for people that were older than that in the 50, 60 plus range. So we are tracking that. And like I said, I would encourage people to continue with proper social distance and mask wearing.
Thank you.
It says that they're no longer doing what's the process for getting your second shot? So Pat Kenny asked a question concerning that. We have been doing the field house, and we were doing mass clinics up there, and we weren't having enough people to warrant that. And so over the next few weeks, we will follow up with each individual for the second shot, and these individuals will either get their shot at their local clinic or from public health. So we are still manning a public health clinic over in vaccination on Sanborn Avenue. And so I would just reach out to public health. If you had a first shot, you would have been scheduled for a second shot. And so we are continuing to doing some second shots at the field house, but we're not doing what we call a mass vaccination clinics, which is initial shots. So as we go through the next few weeks, finishing up the second shots, eventually we won't need the field house at all. And this is just a clarification. Bill. Bill asked if people are being charged for the shot, and they are not. So whether you go to Walgreens, your clinic, or public health, it is covered by the federal government.
Any more comments? Okay, we'll go to number 3 on the agenda, referendum lessons, vote results.
Okay, so this is just a discussion from the referendum vote on the 6th and possible lessons learned for the next time if ever the county tries this again. No action is required, but we'll document for the minutes if any improvements could be made. And so, as you well know, it failed roughly 1,800 to 1,200. And I think part of it was just the timing of the federal government $3 million coming our way. I can see people not wishing to increase their property taxes for that when that money came. And we have this, the American Rescue Plan dollars. We'll be discussing this and answering questions at the end of the agenda here. We have, I think, the last agenda item before closed session is that. So we'll be discussing that. But I think one of the lessons is that I take away is when we think about producing short little videos about what the county does. I think in the long run, and I've talked to my department heads about each one of them talking about doing little 5-minute, 4-minute shorts. Like it or not, people have a very short attention span. We are a video age population now. People don't like to read. And so I think one of the lessons that I think I take away from this would be more education concerning what does the county do, because I think some people don't have a good idea of what the county does. And I would like to go through everything from, land conservation, to water monitoring, to, the court services we provide, all the things that are basically that the county provides, and produce a library that would be available to help educate the population that the county does do more than just plow roads. So with that, are there any other suggestions that you would want to leave for the record for a future board if they have to do this again?
I guess not. Oh, Pat,
No, nobody can hear you online, Pat, if you wouldn't mind.
Copy of the invoice. I don't need a copy of the email, just the invoice. Just this? Yeah, thank you.
Kenny, I would suggest that we put a survey together to ask people what services they're most interested in and what, are less important to them. And then ask them also what they would support in terms of a tax increase, if any, for this. Then you'd have some data to go on and have a pretty good idea of what would or wouldn't pass and what they're willing to support in terms of budget items.
Thank you.
This is Supervisor Ortman, if I could speak.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to see, I would like the citizens of this county to understand how much of their money we have to take to spend on unfunded mandates, because, we get the heat for as if we're trying to raise their taxes when Madison will send half of what we need for their mandated program, or however much they send, and then they make us squeeze the citizens for the rest, and then they don't take any heat for the tax increases we need to fund the entirety of their mandate, and yet they won't let us raise the money to pay for that mandate. I think that has to be brought out in front of the public so they understand how much of this money that we're trying to take from them is a result of people in Madison that don't give a rat's, it seems. And I think that would get them to maybe call down there and say, don't send us directions without money. Or at some point we could just spend the money they send and tell them, if you want us to do more, you're going to have to send more money. But this is going to get into the budget, and it all relates. We needed to have a referendum because we don't get enough shared revenue is a huge part of it. We didn't get any money from the opioid lawsuit, which they got almost 72 counties to sign on and give them leverage. We were promised money. We didn't get any of that. And they don't let us raise money. So there's a lot of actions here that don't make sense coming from Madison. And I think we need to laser focus it down to that as a group, send a resolution or something, but tell the people here how much money they're spending for unfunded mandates. That means their Meals on Wheels might dry up, because I don't think most of them know this. And of course, Madison's never going to try to take the heat for this. They're just going to try to kill us, put us into receivership, it seems. But anyway, that's enough. Thank you very much.
So Supervisor Negro, could I speak?
we have somebody on the floor.
Okay.
My comments will be brief. I think one of the most confusing thing there is about the taxes, and it confuses me as well, is what you're paying for different entities. And I think there needs to be a little more education that goes into that, as far as, your city or your town, they collect money from you. What are they doing with it? Then the county portion of it, what we do with it, and then the school district. And then some of the other things that may be seen on there, or how it affects it, such as libraries and things. And I think for the most part, most people look at their tax bill and it's all the same. They're not looking at what they're getting for each one of those categories. They just see three different entities, attacking their wallet. And, the natural response to that is to be defensive about it and not have them get any more than they can get. So until we can show that this is where it's going, and like Mr. Kinney pointed out, which is excellent idea, is what's important to you, because everybody's going to have a different idea of what's important to them. And as a group, we have to sort that out proportionately. Thank you.
Laura?
I want to dovetail on Matt and Pat's ideas, and Charlie's exactly, because I think this is a clarity issue. I think we need to have more, when we have issues with big spending, we need to make sure that we are making it clear to the public why we're trying to spend those things. And with the surveys and the clarity of the state giving us these unfunded mandates and just making sure that the public doesn't understand all those different moving pieces. And video here during these meetings helps, but not everybody can get on these live either. But if we can have more listening sessions, or each one of us get out to our public, not just in casual like meetings, but actually have little sessions in our own districts, I think the clarity helps everybody understand just what kind of predicament we get in. And it's not a lot of mismanagement. It's just, here we are, we're pigeonholed. Thank you.
Mike. Commissioner Berlin, representing District 13. Excuse me. Last week I was meeting with the county auditors, and we talked about fraud, waste, and abuse. And I think I fared well as I answered the questions. And I had asked, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Oh, not at all. And first question I asked is, how long you guys been auditing for Ashland County? Well, quite some time. And after a bit, Sue came around to the door. She says, they came on board back in 1993. 1993? God, you guys have been here for over 25 years. Well, this is kind of unheard of, having an auditing firm. I'm throwing this auditing firm under the bus right now, mind you, that when you have an auditing firm come in, typically for any kind of government, it's minimum 3, maximum 5 years. Well, these guys have been auditing us for over 25 years. It's been brought to my attention that also when an auditing firm comes in and does an audit, they audit the books for, well, clarity, you know, balances and so on, what have you. And what you normally get out of an auditing firm is findings. They find this, they find that. And usually with a finding comes a recommendation. Well, yesterday we had a roads meeting, and the chairman of the roads had indicated, you know, this is probably one of the jobs of the auditors to identify, like say for instance right now, our healthcare. We're $1.7 million in debt of healthcare. They should have identified that to the board, that there's a trend here. They find this a trend, and they should have had a recommendation. Don't you think? Absolutely. My recommendation at this point in time is we really need to put an RFP out there for our next audit so that we can get some new people in here, some fresh people to take a look at how we operate. It's too late now to go back and say, okay, well, we got the $1.7 million in healthcare benefits. We got this, we got the, hey, we need to answer to our constituents out there, right? Absolutely. We're trying to identify, we're trying to pay the bills. Clarity is a big thing. Last fall, this wheel tax came up, and the board never took action on that. We may be revisiting that real soon. Now we're talking about this referendum that we just had. Was the clarity there? I'm not really sure. And I believe Laura may be the only board member that had met with her constituents, or at least she had indicated that she was going to. And yesterday over at the roads department, I had made mention, you know, to make a point of clarity here, what's wrong with getting a small 2-3 people together and hash this thing out, put it on paper, like a 3-fold piece of paper, like a information type kind of thing, something that we all agree with, right? And something, what it's there, like say for instance, a wheel tax, is motorcycles covered or collector cars covered, anything over 8,000 pounds not covered. So the wheel tax is not the tires on your car, but the vehicle itself. Make it plain and clear, keep it simple. Something that we can put to papers, something we can hand out. Clarity is a big thing here. We need to, you know, we need to answer to the people that put us up on these positions. Thank you.
Happy?
Pep Kabasa, Ward 6. I think Mr. Berlin is correct. When you look at how many people are in your ward and how many really vote, because you can go door to door till hell freezes over and there's still only so many that vote. You go back and talk to them. Hey, you said you were going to come out and vote. What happened? Well, I didn't understand that. And I got to agree with them. Sometimes you guys twist a word that when they go to vote, you voted for the wrong thing because you're not sure. And like you said, you know, it isn't clear enough for the common person, maybe, you know, all blondes you want to say, I don't know. But you want it perfectly clear what we're voting for and make it so everybody understands it. So our people need to get out and vote, but most of them aren't interested. They voted, if they voted for you to make that decision. But the ones that voted, you know, they're not sure where they were at when they did vote some of this stuff. Thank you.
Any more comments?
Franek here, Ward 9. I agree with everybody here. Clarity should be number one. When I talk to my constituents, they say, where is the money going? They want to know line by line. They want to know, you know, they don't want their taxes raised, but they don't understand, you know, where the money is going. So we need to make clear that, you know, that healthcare costs are going up and everything. And, you know, we are looking into that. They want to know what we're doing about stuff. They want to know things before they go out and vote. So I agree with everybody. Thank you.
Anyone else? Moving right along, we go to number 4, forestry plan approval.
This is the annual work plan for the forestry department, and part of the requirements is that it goes through the forest committee and then also gets approved by the county board. With that, we would just seek a motion to approve the 2021 work plan for the forestry department.
So moved.
Already made a motion.
So Supervisor Negro, a second.
Marty
Seconded
first,
by
Negro
Laura.
second.
There you go. We got all kinds of seconds here. We have a motion and a second on the table to accept the forestry plan. All those in favor say aye.
This is Supervisor Ortman. Can we have a little bit of discussion, please?
Anyone opposed, say no.
Discussion?
Discussion.
This is Supervisor Ortman. I would just like to know if they're going to be making, how much money they expect Forest might deliver this year.
This is Supervisor Murdock. I'm on the forestry committee. This year, it may be 600,000. We're not sure. The market is terrible, but what the forestry group is trying to do down there is pin the types of wood that the contractors say they can get rid of at this point, and try and issue the contracts for those tracts of lands that would produce that type of wood. Pine right now is a better market, so he's looking at issuing contracts for that. It's going to be a struggle this year. The Wisconsin Rapids mill closed, the mill up in Minnesota, we're not sure what's going to happen there. A lot of the wood was going to Rapids. So it will be a struggle, but if we hit 600,000, that's still 150,000 short of our goal, you know, that we normally push for. So it's going to be a wait and see. But at the last forestry meeting, you know, we talked about trying to peg that wood market to where we have wood available. So we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, the reason I ask is I know if you're paying $100 for a sheet of plywood now, I thought maybe that translated into higher prices at the resource level, but clearly it's kind of like farming, huh? You buy at retail and sell at wholesale.
Pat?
This is Pat Kinney. I'll address, I guess I'm going to address the chair formally, but to the Forestry Committee, the comments at the end about parks weren't clear to me if you were intending to take action to start looking into that. And then we've got Second Landing, which the county has not really invested in terms of maintenance. And my comment would be that with COVID money, if we're looking for uses, one potential use would be to fund a study to see what the economic benefit would be of developing a park system in Ashland County where you could generate some revenue, but also add to the quality of life to keep people here, and then perhaps some improvements to Second Landing if we're looking for uses for COVID money, if those would be included, it makes sense.
Thanks, Pat. Anyone else? We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the forestry plan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Number 5, financial consultant, WADC grant review.
Okay, this is no action is requested on here. This is just an update. We basically had, in coordination with the administrator for the Department of Revenue, they had encouraged the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation to grant us $25,000 for a fiscal review. You can see the proposal in front of you there. I did sign this contract last week. I'm working with them to have an implement date start of May 1st. WEDC, it might take 4 to 6 weeks for them to get the approval of they're 95% positive it would get approved. If it doesn't get approved, the Department of Revenue thought we probably would be able to use the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So I'm confident we're not going to have to make an adjustment to take out a contingency fund to fund this. And within this document, I'm looking particularly for, I've had concerns about cash flow for the years 2022 and 2023 when I project forward, but not being a finance director, it's hard for me to weigh in on that. In addition, the subcontractors to this contract are in Wisconsin, and they basically are well versed with our software program and accounting program, where we would hopefully, one of the goals would not only have a cash flow analysis, but also basically produce more understandable financial documents. So right now, when we did the finances at the Finance Committee, they were 85 pages long. One of the things I think, especially for the citizens, is can we produce something that would be a couple pages that would kind of just highlight overall revenues and expenses to say, here's where we're at by department, something similar to that, and then also some other policy improvements. We do, currently we cut checks between departments for some things. We'd like to be able to use, improve the journal enterability. So we're looking at this project hopefully to help guide us through the, to get better information for the budget as we develop the budget going forward in July and August. And so this is just an information that I've been working on, and I'm glad to see that they basically we're going to start this project.
Okay. Any comments? We'll go to number 6, zoning ordinance amendment.
So this is a private sewage system ordinance. This was brought before the board last time, and there was a question concerning the private on-site water treatment system, and would it be applicable to individuals who are on the reservation? And Josh had put together a letter that basically stipulates that if they're regulated, if the private on-site water treatment systems are regulated by another organization, the county does not regulate them. This basically would provide $8 per year fee for properties which have a system, and it would go towards the basically the tracking and inspection and regulation of that. It's following the board direction to have people who utilize the service pay for the service when possible. In this case, the money coming from the zoning department would be approximately $18,000, which would help offset the cost of providing this service instead of people who don't need this service actually paying for it. So in this case, you have citizens of Ashland that don't need this service actually pay for the service because we have to do this anyway. And so this is we're just changing the ordinance. You can see the language, the annual maintenance fee for each improved property as subject to the private sewage system ordinance within the county, except those served by municipal sewer, shall be assessed at an annual fee of $8 per year. The annual fee shall be assessed and added to the property tax bill at the rate established by the Land and Zoning Committee. A late fee will be assessed in the event the maintenance fee is not paid by the deadlines as established by the property tax payments and will adhere to the same penalties. With that, I would seek a motion to approve the amendment to the Ashland County Private Sewage System Ordinance.
Gary?
That is Supervisor Murdick. I'm going to make a motion, but it won't be to affirm, and I'll tell you why. I was happy today to hear from Supervisors Berlin, Negro, and Cabasa talking about their constituents. I did my homework on this, and I contacted every town in the county. I will tell you the towns that said no, and then I'll tell you what happened with the rest. Shanna Golden said no. Town of Agenda said no. Town of Chippewa said no. Town of Jacob said no. Town of Morris said no. Town of Peaksville said no. Several of the other towns haven't met yet. I had talked to the chairman of Jingles this morning. He said they're meeting tonight, so they couldn't really answer as a town, but as a chair, he was sure that their town was against this. What this is if the zoning committee meets and says, hey, we need to raise fees, there are ways to raise this fee without coming to this $8 a year for these septic systems. In 2019, I put in a $22,000 mound system at my house. I paid the county $350 for the fee. If the county needs more money, they could raise that fee to $400 or whatever it needs to be. I'm not about to support raising $8. That's not a lot of money. When the constituents I talked to said no. So I'm going to stand here and make a motion to defeat this, and that is my motion. The towns have spoken as far as I'm concerned. The towns I represent, I go to Agenda, the Village of Butternut and Peaksville meetings every month. I also am going to Town of Chippewa, which is Kathy's meeting tonight for another issue. But I go to those towns and I listen, and my townships, along with these other towns, are saying they're against this. So my motion here, if it gets a second, is to defeat this proposed motion here and put this to rest. If the Committee on Zoning wants to raise fees, there's other ways to do it. Like I say, the initial application for a septic system can be raised. I paid the $370 or $350 in October of 19. And if they want to raise that, I'd be fine with that. So that's my motion to defeat.
Yes, Kathy.
So, Kathy Schutte, District 20. So we have a septic system at our house. It's not like what the city has in Ashland. We are responsible for the upkeep and the care of that septic tank. And we have to pump it out. It costs about $250 every time we pump it. So we are responsible for that upkeep. Not like the city where you have to, where the city takes care of it. I am not in favor of this $8 fee also because they are privately owned and we have to pay for the upkeep. It's like our well, we pay for our well and everything else. So I would like to second Gary Mertig's motion and second his motion not to do the $8 fee.
So I have a second and a motion to basically not charge this fee. I will say we have to do this service anyway. Kathy may be a responsible individual and pumps her service on, but other people maybe don't. They basically take a pipe, they take it from their holding tank or their septic system and just run it out on the ground. And part of the job of this service is basically tracking this. So it's a one-time fee when you install the system. But there's a fee there's a cost to the county that goes on forever as we try to monitor these systems. Not everybody is responsible. It's the place of the government to hold people's feet to the fire to say, you have to do this. There's an ordinance that says you have to pump. There are some people that maybe don't do this for 10 years. That's basically polluting the streams and eventually Lake Superior. I do not support that. I will say this, as a county, and I may get on my high horse here for a second. As a county board supervisor, you have two responsibilities. One, you basically represent the people in your district. Those are the people who elected you to hold office. When we set this great country up, we didn't set it up to be a democracy. We realized we can't have every issue that comes before the government be voted on by the citizens. Our founders set the country up to be a democratic republic, meaning your constituents basically elected you to make decisions on their behalf. You have a dual responsibility. One, to your citizens. You have an equal responsibility to the organization and to the state of Wisconsin, which you swore to uphold. You have to fund this. You sometimes have to take hard votes that your constituents are not in favor of, because that's what makes the organization run and function. If you're to vote to say, if you're to say no taxes for any county property at all, I'm sure your citizens would say yes, but that's not the right thing to do. You have an obligation for the organization to support this. You have an obligation. If you basically polled the citizens and said, I want to buy 100 acres of county forest land for $1, I'm sure they would say, yes, let's do that. But that is not your role. Your role is to make sure the organization is functioning. If you do not want to support this, you basically are saying you would rather have the taxpayers that have septic systems pay for this service. The citizens of Ashland City are going to pay for this service versus having the people who actually utilize the service pay for it. Those are my comments.
Supervisor Murdick, I'm not going to get into a tit for tat here and shoot the horse, but we pay for services we don't use already. I pay for a library in the city of Ashland. I've never been in the library in Ashland. So that doesn't hold water. And the fact of somebody having a failing system or cheating on the system, that's supposed to be looked at anyways. And it should have been looked at for years. People who put in a holding tank and 2 days later they go out and they dig the line up and put a running. That's not my problem. That's going on. I know that. And if zoning needs to check that, that's what zoning can do. But this is just an extra tax, and people are fed up to hear with the taxes. And I'm not going to play this game that the city of Mellon or the village of Butternut or the city of Ashland has got to pay for this, because I'm already paying for things that are part of the county, and I don't object to it, but it's a fact.
Pat?
Pat Kinney, I guess I have the dubious honor of being chair of zoning at the moment. If we go back most of a year when I got on the board, one of the things that was discussed in terms of budgets was looking at more user fees. And the administrator and the zoning administrator brought this to the zoning committee as a way of generating a user fee based on who's actually using this. And I do understand people who live outside of a city where you pay for your water and sewer on a sewer bill, because I grew up on a farm up by Mason and have a private septic system there too. So I see it both ways. So this is a user fee consistent with what the board most of a year ago suggested to the administrator. The zoning administrator followed up on that and brought it to zoning. If the board chooses to say no to this, which is the board's prerogative, then when we get to a wheel tax, I think the same conversation holds water there, that the idea of a wheel tax is those who use the roads because you've got a vehicle, you pay for it that way. So one way of addressing the budget is to use more user fees. And the board really did suggest to the administrator most of a year ago that we look at this. And if we're going to say no to this, then again, the wheel tax or other user fees in general. I don't really have a problem with saying no to user fees as long as we then accept that we'll all pay for things that maybe some of us use a lot and some of us don't use at all. And that's true, and I'm okay with that. But it does mean when we get to budget season, more of it's going to fall on the budget we pass, and we can only increase the debt levy, the general levy only through net new construction, which we have the lowest rate in the state. So we try to move things to the debt levy. And so if we don't have user fees, that debt levy goes up a bit more and we all pay equitably based on our assessed values. And so these are two paths that we're picking here. And this is really the first case on a user fee, I believe, that the administration has brought to us to find out if we're in support of user fees or not. And I'm okay with this either way. I get that. As a person in Ashland, I pay every cent that it costs the city to operate the water and sewer plant, do the billing, everything related to that. Half of us are in the city as far as population goes. We pay all of that. You know, so you could talk about fairness, but then Gary doesn't use the library. I'm there every week, sometimes twice. So, you know, either way is okay, but I think what we're really saying to the administrator is, should he put more time and effort into user fees, or should we not do that route and look at other routes to deal with the budget?
Happy.
I just have a question as to if we go ahead and adopt this, who carries out that job? Do we hire more people? Do we hire a secretary? Do we hire more people to run that when, like it was said, zoning used to go around and check all these places out in the country and on the island, and they're getting some, I'm not saying the island, don't get me wrong here. I'm just saying everybody is getting away with a lot of stuff that we don't know about. And we have the ability right now with zoning, but do we have the money to mandate this and make them go out and start checking this? Are they too busy that they can't? And how many more people are we going to have to hire to make this go through?
Any more comments? Matt?
On this one here in particular, you know, I haven't gone to the zoning committee meetings and I trust the work that's done there. So, you know, they come and they say, hey, we need some additional money. This is a way for us to do it. My assumption is, and I'm sure it's not wrong, is that there was a deal of discussion there and some serious kicking of cans and figuring this out. And I support that. $8 to help address this problem does not seem to be bad. I'll tell you this, in my time on the county board, I've seen a new zoning administrator come in and actually do something with this. And it is getting better. And it continues to be a problem in our county and probably statewide. And it affects our public health in that this stuff is being dumped where it shouldn't be dumped. And I also want to address the misconception that the city doesn't pay anything for the disposal of their waste. Believe me, we do. It's in our bill. Thank you.
Now, we have a motion on the table to deny the private sewage system ordinance. Do we have a second? You seconded it, Kathy? Judy is a second. You want a roll call on this, or?
Yeah, why don't you have a roll call on this? So basically, if you're going to vote yes, you're basically voting to not charge $8 for the septic system. If you vote no, it'd be back on the table for further debate. So yes vote kills this proposal, basically saying you don't need the money. And then yes vote, no vote would be put it back on the table for further discussion. So why don't we do a roll call vote with that, Heather?
Jennings,
No.
Berlin,
No.
Mike Berlin, no.
No.
Corpola,
No.
Micka,
No.
Vitek,
Yes.
Huber,
Yes.
Hennanen,
No.
Weiner,
Yes.
Shudi,
Yes.
Murdig,
Yes.
Magro,
No.
Mackenzie,
No.
Quebec,
No.
Metzinger,
Yes.
Campbell,
No.
Kabasa,
No.
Kinney,
No.
Ortman,
No.
Brannick,
Yes.
Pufall,
No.
No.
Bendor,
No.
Seven yes, 14 no.
Motion fails.
Yep.
Pat?
So now we would seek a motion to approve this.
This is Supervisor Ortman. I'll make a motion to approve this.
And do we have a second? John Weiner, second of the motion.
Weiner seconded.
Discussion, Pat?
This is Pat Kenny. I'd like to ask the zoning administrator, I believe that's him over there or not. So maybe some middle ground on this is if we have people that don't follow the rules and our staff spends considerable time on that, maybe we look at fines as part of the avenue of generating revenue. So if people aren't following the rules, they're the ones that pay that bill in particular. So I'll just ask you the question, what are the fines? Could we increase them? And how far might that go towards filling this gap to cover staff time to address the concerns that you have?
So fines could go a long ways. Currently, if you're caught, your first offense is $767.50. $267.50 goes to court costs. $500 would come back to the county. On the first offense, the zoning committee decided to waive that if the property owners come into compliance. Second offense, that will double, so $1,000 would come to the county. $267.50 still goes to the court system. We've written a number of citations, of which we haven't had to go through enforcement because the property owners have come into compliance. So the citation route has been set up as a compliance motivator for people. So we haven't actually generated any revenue through enforcement because we allow them a grace period to come into compliance.
How many of those issues where they're not in compliance you think are deliberate, where they purposely got out of compliance?
All of them.
Then I guess I would suggest to you as chair of zoning to bring back to the zoning committee a proposal to change how we currently have that practice. And I guess a question for the administrator, if this is passed this year, it goes on the property tax bill at the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay, so that gives us time to work through this issue, yeah. So I guess my thought at the moment is we come back to zoning, we look at how many people get out of compliance, we look at fines there, we look at how much revenue that may generate along with how much workload it may reduce for you if people are more inclined to stay in compliance because of the fines. We look at that issue first, and then we bring this back after we've had that discussion. That would be my preference at the moment, because it still gives us plenty of time to bring this back to the full board before the end of the year. We're going to tax bill anyway.
Well, it would be my recommendation to pass this because I think the county is going out of their way, as Josh says. We come across people who are not in compliance. We are not hard asses. We basically say, come into compliance, do this. We don't hand out tickets. So we basically raise zero revenue by encouraging people to come into compliance. The $750 is that's a big ticket. And everybody comes into compliance because of that. And so, really our goal is to have people be in compliance, but it costs money to make that happen. And we really don't get any money from compliance unless the county board says, first offense, first day, first hour, you get a $750 ticket. I think that's also going to produce some political consequences by us doing that. I would recommend passing this $8 because that supports us helping people be in compliance.
I guess I'd rather come back to zoning and discuss the fines and the numbers here. And the $8 is a number that's based on current practice. And if we change the practice of fines, then that $8 might turn out to be something different, something less, which might be more palatable to the board and the voters. So my preference is still to come back to zoning, but.
All right, if it passes today and we take that route also, that fee, the $8 fee is set by the committee. So if it passes today, which it certainly could, and we decide to take a look at citations and how those are enforced, and the committee is happy with maybe a new layout and enforcement, that $8 fee could get dropped down to $4, $2, or nothing. It could be in place but not charged at the discretion of the committee.
So we have a zoning meeting next week. Could you get this on the agenda for that yet?
I believe the packets are out, but we can do an amended
Yeah,
agenda, yeah.
yeah, if you would amend it, we'll talk about that next week. And as long as we visit this issue, we could change that $8. It could come back to the board for approval of changing the 8 if 8 passes today.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't have to come back to the board to change the 8. It's set at the committee's discretion, I believe.
Okay, all right, thank
So
you.
we already have a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay,
Laura?
Dylan Jennings also has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to make it very clear. A couple have already talked about this, but it's a public health issue, right? You know, and oftentimes someone brought up the fact that it's very hard to regulate this at times, and it can be, right? But a lot in our experience here in the community here and in other places that I've seen, it's often citizens that raise red flags, right? If you see your neighbor, you know, isn't pumping their systems or doesn't seem to have a system, right? People call that kind of stuff in and raise those red flags to bring attention to that stuff. You know, if my neighbor isn't complying and is negatively impacting or contaminating resources in my backyard, I'm going to say something, you know, and I just got to say, it's a dangerous precedence to set to not regulate our waste systems. And we really have to be thinking about cumulative impact that can lead to as far as public health issues. So I think it's really imperative that we take this seriously, pass this. I know nobody wants to pay extra money. Nobody does. You know, if you took a poll and asked people if they want to pay more money out of their hard-earned, you know, money pockets, and I'm sure everyone would say no. But, you know, when it comes to wastewater and it comes to our drinking water systems, those are things that we really have to take seriously. So, miigwech. Thank you.
Laura?
I had a question for Josh. Josh, how much time do you spend on each one of these cases trying to get it back into compliance?
Well, the issue at hand today is not necessarily compliance. It's all of our open records requests from property owners, realtors, plumbers, home inspectors, things like that. The compliance set is completely different. If Clark wants me to go into compliance side of things, I certainly can right now. But the motion and the amendment is for the fee for, you know, what we're doing currently. Do you guys have time? Do you want to hear about it?
I'm happy to hear about it.
Okay. So when we go out to a site, typically it's complaint driven because I'm the only person in the office. So we go out, oftentimes we have a case right now in Marengo. I went out for one case and I ended up with 4 more. So we're in the process there. Once we make contact, issue the citation, the shock factor on the citation is big enough. Normally within 24 hours, I get a call from a plumber and the septic caller saying I'm scheduled to go out to the property, which the whole purpose of the high dollar citation was the shock and awe, because people it's cheaper to get your plumber out there and get pumped and get on a schedule than it is to pay the citation. So that's part of the motivation there on why that citation was so big. On average, we probably spend simply on a citation enforcement process, follow through with the plumbers and the pumpers, we're probably 3 hours into a property on average.
And the goal of that actually is to bring them in compliance. So we actually get $0 for that.
Correct.
So this fee helps us support people being in compliance. If we're interested in doing this, this is how you support it.
Yep, that was the reason why I asked the question. Thank you.
Matt?
I have firsthand experience at some of this, and I can tell you there's been situations in our county where over 1 million gallons of sewage waste was dumped right straight into a river. And, you know, that's from your neighbors who don't see anything wrong in what they're doing. And it adds up, and it's a significant issue. And if we're going to take clean water serious, this is where we need to start.
We have a case right now ongoing in Marengo. They put a new mound system in and they continually overload it due to faults with the installation, faults of the property owner. We've been lied to by the property owner. That particular property, I probably got 45 hours in on one enforcement. So I mean, on average 3 hours, but I'm meeting with the state again on the property tomorrow to go over the next steps. And, you know, you have a $90,000 mound system that potentially may be forced to scrape off and not use it because he can't stay within the parameters of his approval. So unfortunately, there's no guarantees, you know, when you start an enforcement process, how it's going to go forward. So.
Happy?
I think we're going to end up being enforcers, because I know in the city here, you can open your eyes, open your minds, and right around Ashland, we have a person that we ended up paying for to go around and write citations for lawns, for property. That was a new money thing that the city wanted. And you can still right now, right around Ashland, and go, how many citations did they get? They might have got 100 of them, but they still haven't done anything. And I guarantee you, the neighbors aren't squawking as much as you think. And it's going on around the outskirts of this town, and the people that are in it, in Marengo, all over the place, have to deal with it because there's consequences if they do open their mouth and it goes back to the owner. So you better consider having a good size. If our people have to go out and check this, they're buying.
All right, we have any more discussion?
When you work on this agenda item for next week, research, and along with the administrator, if you can charge a fine on the first offense, a flat fee, but also then above any number of hours, a per hour fee that would pay for staff time. Because if you got 45 hours into one property that everybody else is paying for, that's just not right. So if we get to say, you know, 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever you think is reasonable based on what the fine is, but then if you can tag on a per hour fee, that would encourage people to do it right the first time and take care of it sooner than later. Thank you.
Any more discussion before we vote? There's a motion and a second on the table to approve the private sewage system ordinance. Pep, you.
And let's do a roll call vote on that.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote, Lori.
So the yes vote will basically mean you're going to approve the amendment to the Ashland County Private Sewage System Ordinance, and that's attached to your packet here. It's 25 pages long. So a yes vote basically means we're going to assess $8 per year for people who have a private on-site water treatment system. And a no vote means just the opposite.
Lori, can we have a roll call?
That would be Heather.
Berlin. Corpola.
Yes.
Mika.
Yes.
Vitek.
Yes.
Huber.
Yes.
That was a yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Hennanen.
Yes.
Weiner.
Yes.
Shudi.
No.
Murdig.
No.
Negro.
Yes.
Mackenzie.
Yes.
Quebec.
Yes.
Etzinger,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kabasa,
Yes.
Kinney,
Yes.
Ortman,
Yes.
Brannick,
No.
Hufall,
Yes.
Stendor,
Yes.
Jennings,
Yes.
18 yes, 3 no.
Thank you.
Moving right along, we'll go to number 8, budget timeline review.
This is number 7, actually,
Oh, I'm sorry,
Chairman
number 7,
Kufal.
County newspaper.
Yeah, so this had brought to the attention during the last appointment to a vacant county seat for the passing of Joe Rose. The county board had discussed and the executive committee had discussed having a official county newspaper for advertisement. This goes back to when we use the word advertise, what does that mean? In the past, the county has not had an official county newspaper. And we basically, the counties under 250,000 population are not required to designate a county newspaper. They are free to use any paper they wish for any purpose. That being said, if the county board wants to designate a preferred official paper, they are free to do so. Attached is a resolution stating as such. And in the past, what has happened is there's also a paper in Glidden and Mellon. In the past, what has happened is we've gone back and forth between Mellon and Glidden and the Daily Press concerning the publications of county board proceedings, minutes, and those type of activities. So the county, if you pass this resolution, it would name the Ashland Daily Press as your official paper of record. The county could be free at any point, and I would recommend you would evaluate this every January to say, do you want to pass the paper of record around once a year, or once, just switch every 3 years to going back and forth. So you can change this at any time you want, but this would basically name and help save us money, because we basically would only be publicizing in one paper at a time. It would save the money, save the county some money. And with that, I would basically just seek a resolution, or seek a motion to pass resolution R04 2021 1384.
Do we have a motion?
Quebec.
Okay,
First.
Philomena made the motion. Do we have a second? Happy?
Second, Brannick.
Just wait a minute. Who seconded it? Happy seconded it? Okay. Sorry. All right, discussion. Go ahead, Kathy.
So in Ashland County, there are 3 legal newspapers in the county: the Glidden Enterprise in Glidden, the Mellon Weekly Record in Mellon, and the Ashland Daily Press. The Daily Press is printed twice a week, and the other 2 are printed twice a week. Or twice a week. The Daily Press is twice a week, and Mellon and Glidden are once a week. Glidden and Mellon charge $30 a year for their subscription. They do this rotation. They've been doing this for many years. One year the Daily Press prints it, the next year the Mellon paper prints it. Then they go back to Ashland, and then they go to Glidden, and then they rotate it. And they would, if anything else gets passed today, the 3 newspapers would like that to remain the same. What we would like to say is that because these papers are the legal newspapers, we would like to see all 3 of the newspapers be the record of paper for the county, because they have businesses down in Glidden. Not everybody has the internet, and some people enjoy reading the newspaper. In Glidden, they have 975 subscriptions that go out every week. In Mellon, they have 400 paid subscriptions, plus about 100 subscriptions that are bought like through stores in Marengo or Mellon or someplace in Ashland. But we would like to see all three of the newspapers be the paper of record for Ashland County, not just the Daily Press.
All three newspapers being county record, the county official newspaper would increase the cost of the county for advertising because we currently don't do that. So we'd have to increase the budget for that from somewhere.
This is Supervisor Ortman, if I might.
Hang on a minute.
You bet.
Happy?
Philomena?
Pepe, if you need to ask a question, you have to come up to the microphone.
Yes.
I mean, my concern is that we need to make sure that we have transparency and openness. And so, you know, I think it's worth spending money to make sure that our county constituents are as informed as possible about what's going on. So I think that I would accept that as a friendly amendment as long as it works with Pepe to make sure that the you know, all the official notices are going to the three official papers in the county. I mean, I've heard from at least one constituent about concerns related to the you know, certainly the you know, the plans for the new COVID funds that are coming in, and then the budgetary concerns, the process that happens. You know, certainly these processes should provide opportunities for our constituents to be able to participate in them. And, you know, simply having these discussions and these decisions being made in the executive and finance committees does not encourage participation from other people who have ideas, who should be able to weigh into these particular decisions. So, you know, I'm very concerned about just making sure that the citizens are informed about the meetings that are happening, the decisions that are taking place, and opportunities to participate. So, yeah, I agree, definitely.
Philomena, thank you for saying it much better than I did.
Again, this newspaper has been in the business for over 100 years. And that's one thing that we can't afford to do is lose a business. The town of Jacobs is down to a handful of business. So this one here would be a tragedy.
Bill.
I guess this is Supervisor Metzinger. I guess I heard a couple different things. I heard one wanting to rotate the county designated newspaper every 3 years, 1 year in Ashland, 1 year in Mellon, 1 year in Glidden. And then I heard another thing saying we should put it in all three papers. I think we need to have clarification what we want to do. And we mentioned the Mellon and Glidden paper, their subscription, but we never mentioned what the Ashland Daily Press is. I think it's important that I'd like to know how many people subscribe to the Daily Press. Dick, would you answer that?
Yeah,
I
so
subscribe is $125 a year.
Yeah, but how many people subscribe to?
I don't know.
Yeah, right. Laura basically put in some information into the chat box here. Ashland circulation is 7,252 people. Mellon is 1,037, and Glidden is about 1,000. You know, and so right now, if you know, we have a motion on the floor to basically pass this resolution, which would make the Ashland Daily newspaper the paper of record. If we wanted to change the resolution to have all three papers, and then of course increase costs to the county and increase the budget, you'd have to change the resolution to reflect that. So right now you're debating the resolution to make Ashland Daily Press the paper of record. That's your motion. That's been seconded.
Laura?
I looked up those numbers, one, to see kind of how many people, I mean, that's just the official counts that they have, which means circulation is just how many papers they print. The Mellon paper actually says that subscriptions, where the other ones don't. But when we're talking about this, and I am the biggest proponent of being open and having everything everywhere, is the Ashland newspaper available in all these other cities? That's one question. And if we are going to have 3 papers that we put this in, we have talked already about how many services we're going to have to cut. What kind of expense is that going to be? And how much, where are we going to pull it from? Because we just had a $30 fight over an $8 fee for stuff that takes a lot more of our people's time. So I'd like some input on that if you can.
Myers?
I think when you look at the wording of what Clark read as far as counties that have populations of 250,000 or more have to have an official paper, official newspaper, singular as the newspaper of record, and that counties under that population can designate a newspaper, singular, as a paper of record. That's not, that wouldn't hinder us from publishing some of this stuff in the other 2 papers, but just name one paper as the official newspaper of record.
Kathy?
On behalf of all the businesses south of the town of Marengo, where there are a lot of business people and people who run a business and loggers and all these people, not everybody gets the Ashland Daily Press at $125 a year. If you look in the paper from the past election, they don't even print anything about the county anymore. They don't print the election results. They do for the city council, but they print nothing for the county. Mellon was the first one out with this last week's town's election. The Daily Press had nothing in it. And I would like to see all 3 of the newspapers do it for a year and see what the cost is, and let the businesses down southern part of the county get into the, where they can see where you're doing a timber sale, where you're buying or you're doing some kind of business that the people down south could take part in that business opportunity. Thanks.
I think what we should do is put this on hold and get an estimate of the cost if we designate all 3 newspapers before we vote on this.
This is Supervisor Ortman. I would like to make that motion. Dick, I'll move to postpone this to the next meeting and pending receipt of information.
Point of order.
Yep.
Got a motion on the table.
I think a motion to postpone is appropriate. Maybe I'm wrong.
Or we can vote this down, start over.
This is Supervisor Ortman. May I have the floor for a minute anyway?
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you. I think I don't care if we have a resolution declaring an official county newspaper, but I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. What I worry about is getting county information to everyone in the county, which I see we have 3 papers that could perform that function, and I really think the cost is worth it. Whatever, well, not whatever it is, but I think within what I think it might be, it's definitely worth it because, as others have stated, we're not trying to leave out anybody in this county, and I don't think anyone should come around and have to buy the Ashland Daily Press or any paper other than one that's most close to them. And our goal should be getting whatever information is applicable to our citizens to them for whatever means we have. And so if we've got to buy I won't call it advertising, or public notices in 3 papers, then that's what we do. I think that's our duty to the citizens. So I agree with Chairman Pufall. Let's find out what that is, and then let's decide this. If it is prohibitive, then I think we have to pick. If we have to pick one, we have to pick one that reaches the most people. But I certainly wouldn't vote to pick one. I think we really need to put these notices in all 3 papers. Thank you.
Well, I think what we have to do, we have to take a vote on this up or down, and then if it votes down, then we can start over. Pardon me?
So Ms. Quebec, who made the motion, is withdrawing her motion, and Ms. Kabasha is withdrawing her second.
Okay.
Robert's rules, once second, comes forward no longer. And a move table this, if it's appropriate, motion that's on the floor. So I think the entertaining motion of the table.
Okay, Matt, for those of you online, Matt basically says that once a motion has been made and seconded, it no longer belongs, is no longer is held by the person who made the motion. It belongs to the organ, to the council or the board here. But there would be a motion to table would basically table it. The motion to pass this would still be in effect, but we would table it till the next meeting to get further information. Is that a summary, Matt? Okay, so is there a motion to table this?
I think that motion is the postponement motion. This is Supervisor Ortman. I think that's right, but I think the motion is to postpone.
All right, we have a motion to table. Do we have a second? Mike?
Second that.
Mike Berlin, second that.
I have a motion and a second on the floor to table the newspaper designation. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Point number 8, budget timeline review.
This is just for board information. The Finance Committee is looking at starting the budget process on May 11th. This would basically be where they could give guidance. There's not a lot of guidance to give, but the only guidance they could give is, do they want to budget for staff increases? When you look at I'm not going to read the write-up. You guys can read that yourselves because you've already read it. This would basically, we would distribute this information. The Finance Committee would set the guidance, mostly just for, would there be any increase in debt levy? And if there isn't, then that would be guidance. Would there be staff increases? Then that would be another guidance. We basically would send the information out to the departments with 4 months of information, which is not very much information. Normally we send it out with 6 months of information for them so they get a feel for what their budgets actually are. So we would basically come back in June, July, and August for department heads to talk to the Finance Committee concerning their budgets. Come September is when we would really do the budget, because that's when we get the debt limit report, we get the levy limit worksheet, we get the equalized value, we get shared revenues, we would get the what our reinsurance would be for our insurance numbers, we would get and then so that in September basically is when we actually would adjust the budget to what the revenue is coming in. And then finance would see it on September 21st. County board would have a review of it on October 5th. We would change the budgets per any board direction. On the 14th, Finance Committee would do a final review and propose debt levy. On the 15th, we talked to the bank about the debt loan for our debt levy. The 18th, we would send in public notice, publish the public notice on the 20th. Board would meet on November 9th to have a public hearing and approve the budget. After that, we close on the debt levy loan, and then we certify the debt levy on December 13th. So this is just information that, and obviously it's all subject to change because, you know, getting all these equalized values, insurance numbers, shared revenue reports, that's all very iffy. It comes in when it comes in. There's not much we can do about it. And the insurance issue, what we're dealing with, that may even be into October before we get finalized numbers on that. So these are all, starting the budget early would just provide the Finance Committee with the opportunity to talk to department heads about their budgets. So no action on there. We'll take questions if anybody has any questions.
Any more discussion? All right, moving right along. Number 9, hiring freeze.
Dick, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Supervisor Quebec, District 3. In this process, I hope there are going to be opportunities for public comment and public participation. You know, certainly we have received direction from the Department of Revenue that holding meetings at times when more citizens are available is advisable. So these, you know, these budget hearings that are going to happen, these meetings of the Finance Committee should be held in the evening, and there should be multiple opportunities for citizens to participate in these hearings. Now we know how to use Zoom meetings. And, you know, as a working parent with a lot of responsibilities, I very much appreciate the opportunity to Zoom into a meeting, you know, when I'm making dinner, so that I can, you know, I can be an active participant of my community. And, you know, certainly I hope that we can facilitate more participation, because as we've talked about earlier in the meeting, a lot of people in this county don't know what's going on. And if we hold meetings at 9 o'clock in the morning in a room somewhere, and, you know, folks aren't even notified about what's going on, you know, that the meeting has been scheduled, how are we fulfilling our mission in terms of making this an open and transparent process? So I would really, really recommend that the Finance Committee considers ways to bring in public and bring in, you know, more engagement into this process. Thank you.
It's my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the chairman of the Finance Committee can set the time of the meeting. And so I believe that's Mr. Berlin. So if Mr. Berlin wishes to, I'm sure he would be in concert with his fellow Finance Committee members before he make that decision, but that is something that he could certainly consider, as having 5 o'clock meetings.
Ready to move on?
Yep.
Number 9, hiring freeze.
Last executive committee meeting, they made a recommendation to have a hiring freeze effective on April 21st. In light of the failed referendum and concerns about the general finances of the 2022 through 2023 budget, the executive committee is recommending immediate hiring freeze for all county positions. Positions that need to be replaced or hired would have to have the department head appeal to the executive committee, which would grant an exemption to the hiring freeze. Points from the county administrator to the full board consideration are that some positions we have are mandated. The county has no choice but to hire those people. Public safety would have to be evaluated if we don't hire correctional officers, deputies, child protection workers, public health workers, etc. Short-term non-benefit employees, summer help for programs like Highway and Spark program would be a challenge to wait until an executive meeting to hire these positions. Should the county create exemptions from the hiring freeze by position? If a position is grant funded, so no levying dollars, should that be exempt? In an emergency, should the county board chair authorize hiring? Can parent committees authorize an exemption to the hiring freeze? Can the county administrator authorize hiring and explain positions to the executive committee after the fact? if we receive and accept a grant, is at a de facto approval. Do positions which are already approved and hired but have not started exempt? Are positions which are advertised before 21 exempt? Current budget has been approved by the board and we are hiring and spending within that budget. If we need to cut positions as part of the 22 budget, these positions would have to be eliminated at that time. It is unknown at this time what effects the American Rescue Plan Act dollars will have on this year's budget and the next couple years. My suggestion is we wait until we see guidance from U.S. Treasury to see if we can supplement federal money for general county levy before we stop hiring. In addition, the Health and Human Services Director had sent a letter to county board members. While I understand the support for rationale for hiring freeze and take very seriously the situation the county is related to the budget, I am requesting that you consider having some positions exempt from hiring freeze being proposed. Recruiting and hiring staff is very time consuming, long process. From advertising, interviewing, hiring, waiting for the candidate to give notice, the time can take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the time the candidate needs notice their current employer. A new hiring freeze could potentially add another month to the process. In cases of fully funded grant positions, not being able to fill these timely could result in possibly jeopardizing the grant because we're not able to provide the identified services and meet the outcomes. Many of you have made aware of the significant grant Health and Human Services received, Prevention of Substance Abuse, the Brighter Futures Initiative. This is a fully funded grant with many part-time positions and a bit of turnover. Because positions are not full-time, there'd be no benefit for not allowing positions to be immediately recruited for and filled in this position. We also have comprehensive community services, which require little or no levy, that we would request to be exempt from the hiring freeze. We also have mandated services such as child protection that need to provide regardless of whether there's a hiring freeze. Not filling positions would result in overtime and burnout of employees. Finally, we're in the midst of a global pandemic, which the public health has been instrumental in contact tracing, quarantining, providing vaccinations, and coordinating public health providers. Public health has been invaluable in its efforts to mitigating COVID-19. Not being able to fill positions timely could have disastrous consequences. I'd like to propose that we allow to be advertised in advertisements such as Indeed, Campus, social media platforms, open positions, and schedule interviews for the nearest date following executive committee. This would also be an event an executive committee agreed in a new position. We could be in much more expedited process to be able to fill the positions. A hiring freeze is problematic. I think it's an easy thing to say, but if you were to talk to, the consequences of delaying a hiring of a correctional officer is increasing county costs due to overtime, because you don't have a choice of not providing coverage. The same thing happens with deputies. If we're in the middle of the winter and we have to hire a highway worker, again, we're basically increasing overtime costs. I think the place of the board is to approve a budget and then the managers to work within that budget. And I would basically recommend that we not institute a hiring freeze effective 4/21. And that's my summary. I'll take questions.
Gary?
Yeah, the executive committee's thinking behind this was to let the public know that we're actually doing something about this budget deficit. And I agree with the department heads. There are positions that need to be filled immediately, and we can look at those. If a department comes and says, I've got a snowplow driver that just quit, and it's the middle of winter, and we can't do without that snowplow driver, that's a phone call within a day. It isn't going to take a week. The executive committee has the ability to do a Zoom call. The chairman and the administrator can say, we need this position, we need to fill it. Human Services, they had it right on. They have some positions that are funded by outside grants, other services. We need those positions. I'm all in favor of hiring those people. The hiring freeze sends a message to the public that that referendum went down and we're listening. There are going to be some positions where we don't need to fill them tomorrow or the next day. And this is not going to delay it. If it takes weeks to post the job in the paper or anywhere else, executive or the administrator and the chair can meet immediately. They can have a recommendation from the department head and administrator that we need that position. There shouldn't be a lot of questions there. But if there's positions we don't need right now, and we could do away with for a couple of weeks, a month, whatever, I'm in favor of that. So the hiring freeze isn't locked you out. It's to send a message to the taxpayers that we're going to look at each position, whether it's needed. And that's all this was. The executive committee approved it, and I think we have enough discretion to say the department heads came to us, they say it's needed, we need to replace that person. I have no problem with that.
Clarence?
I'm not opposed to a hiring freeze, but I want to support some of the things that Clark said and also what Terry Barningham said that Clark read as far as how that could affect Health and Human Services. I would be more in favor of having the department head appeal to either Clark and or the county board chair rather than the executive committee. If you have a Zoom meeting for the executive committee to consider appeal, does that mean that we have to pay a $50 per diem for all 5 members of the executive committee? So we're kind of defeating the purpose of saving money when you're gonna put in a per diem for that executive committee meeting. Clark kind of mentioned some of the effects that it could have on Health and Human Services. Most of the programs that are run are mandated. Many of them are supported by state and federal dollars. If we can't continue to provide those services, we jeopardize our funding of those programs, and it's going to come back to county dollars to pay for them. An example is child support. Right now, the workers in child support are probably handling a caseload of about 500 cases. We've done studies over all of human services, and our social workers and workers in that department are handling a lot greater caseloads than comparable counties just about anywhere in the state. If we have a worker that leaves, that means that those 500 cases have to be divided up between the remaining workers until we get approval to hire a replacement. And many of the programs are subject to timelines. Things have to be done on a timely basis. And the longer it drags out, it can hinder our funding. Child support receives 66% reimbursement, but they have to meet some guidelines as far as getting that reimbursement. If they don't meet the guidelines, they don't get all of that reimbursement. So if we delay in hiring a replacement, we could jeopardize some of that funding. Many of our positions require levels of education, certification, and licensure, and if we have to wait, sometimes we have problems finding people that meet those qualifications, and if we have to delay hiring, it just further delays the program. Some of them require extensive training to be fully trained to run that program, and again, this delays our implementation of those programs. So I would support a hiring freeze with the recommendation that appeals be approved by either Clark and or our board chair.
Are you making that a motion?
Sure.
Gary?
Supervisor Murdock, I would second that motion.
Motion made by Clarence Campbell, seconded by Gary Murdock. Pat?
Pat Kinney, I'm going to support the hiring freeze, and for this reason. As a member of the Finance Committee, we have tight budgets. Roughly 80% of the costs for operating for the county is personnel. And, I'm going to remind the administrator, one of the articles in the paper here not so long ago, you said if the referendum fails, we may have to cut 6 to 8 positions. Well, on the one hand, we can't say, well, we got to hire and fill positions. And on the other hand, say, well, we're going to have to cut 6 to 8 people. Who are those 6 to 8 people if we were going to cut? We don't know. What I would recommend with the hiring freeze, if this passes, is that the executive committee and the administrator create a document that lists every position the county has, whether they're grant funded or not, And other notes related to the need to fill immediately or otherwise. Some of these positions you may make exempt from a hiring freeze, if, for example, if they're 100% grant funded, or there's just absolutely no way we can go without. And so those are in place so that if those positions become available, we know that. And at the same time then, from a finance perspective, as budgets keep getting tighter, we start to have an idea of if we have to make some changes in the level of personnel. We've taken a hard look at the job descriptions for everyone that we have, and that will help us understand if there's any efficiencies we can create, especially if people leave the county, so if there's some things that we can do differently. So it would help us start to take a hard look at those efficiencies in the process of doing that if you put that document together.
Matt? No, Pepe, I said Matt.
We sound a lot alike. I guess I'm not sure yet on where I'm at on this hiring freeze. I could support a hiring freeze for brand new positions, positions that aren't currently funded under our budget. That would make sense to me until, you know, executive committee and finance committee sorted out whether that position made sense and gave approval for it. To me, I think it would make more sense to look at grants that we're applying for right now, in that there's no such thing as a free lunch. If you get a grant, usually there's a match, and you know that's where we get ourselves into problems. It can be a match in kind where, you know, our personnel are doing something to offset that cost. But to me, I think we need to look closely at what we're taking for grants and figure that into our new future, whatever it's going to be. So I guess if the hiring freeze was just simply no new positions until executive committee has looked at it. And when I say new, I mean positions that currently aren't funded under the budget that was approved by us. I can support something to that, but if it's just an outright hiring freeze, I don't think I can support that at this point.
We do have a motion on the floor, and this is what you're debating. The motion on the floor is institute a hiring freeze with exemptions to hire positions granted by the county board chairperson and the administrator joint approval. That's the motion that's on the table.
We have one more. Laura, had your hand up for quite a while.
I did. You wouldn't believe how strong that arm is getting. What I'd like to say on this one is, you know, we're already looking at our budgets through a grant from the state and having people deep dive in there. We already have departments looking at possible cuts and looking into combined different positions that they don't need because they know we don't have the money. We've already approved this budget. They know they have to work inside it. And yeah, I know there's overtime sometimes here and there, and that's because we go back to those unfunded mandates. But we also need to remember that as committees, we can keep watch on the departments that are under our purview for each one. And remember, when every time that in a committee, when we approve an expense, that adds to the budget, and that wasn't approved in the budget. But right now, this as great as it sounds, this hiring freeze feels to me like walking around and looking like you're busy because you got papers in your hand. It looks like you're doing something, but in reality, all we're doing is creating some mess here because it stops our departments from doing what they need to do in the timeliness they need to do it, to be as responsive to the citizens as they can be under the money that they have now. So I'm not I don't think we need any of it. I think they just need, they're already aware. They already know we have to cut.
Mike.
As chairman of the finance committee, I need to say this. It's not the position of the finance committee to micromanage the programs. That's why we have the managers there. The managers make recommendations to us. And one of the things I would like to see forthcoming is in this arena, as we stand and sit here today, I would like to see some of these managers, if not all of the managers, come to us, make a presentation on their operations. annual operations, quarterly operations, and if need be, daily operations. These departments are important to us. They're, you know, we count on them, and we need their help. And I'll be reaching out to both the chairman of the board, Dick Pufall, and also the executive director, or Clark. So we have a lot of work to do, and we got a short time to do it. I'm not sure how we're going to accomplish it all, but that's our task at hand. I need to say that. Thank you.
This is Supervisor Ortman, if I could get a chance sometime. Thank you.
Sorry, Charlie. I'm.
No, that's fine. I was just putting my notice in.
Alrighty. This is Supervisor Quebec. I am in support of a hiring freeze. We have a cash flow problem, and a hiring freeze will create some delays that will you know, reflect positively in the budget. And you know, it's unfortunate because certainly there's very important things that the county has to do, and staffing is probably already tight. But you know, I think this could be a measure that could positively benefit. Certainly exemptions should be granted when we have positions that come up that are fully funded. And you know, I do support this idea that there's a expedient process to grant exemptions. You know, I run grants myself, and it's always really challenging to meet all the deadlines because you have certain objectives, and sometimes you have very tight timelines. There's the federal grants especially, you can have very tight timelines. So if there's an exemption for, I would support an exemption for positions that don't have any effect on the general fund. So if there's complete outside funding, then, you know, certainly I like this idea of creating a schematic to look at where the, you know, all the, you know, where the positions are, what the positions are and where they are. And then, you know, certainly the funding source of these positions to figure this out, because this, you know, this type of policy could be a tool to use in addressing the cash flow situation, which is about funding, but it's also about timing. If you have a position that's open for a little bit, and you have a number of different positions that are open for a little bit, you eventually might fill those positions, but then in that period of time, you might have those 6 to 8 positions that Pat's talking about that we don't have the funding for. And so that, you know, this is a tool that could be used. And I support us, you know, thinking about it. Thank you.
This is Supervisor Ortman.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you, Dick. I agree with what this proposal could do, but I think it's very premature. This budget is under effect, and the departments are doing what they can do within this budget. They're already constricted. I see this as something we look at after we know what this federal money is, where we're going to be able to apply that or not, and gives us time to see if our receipts go up. We've got every house in this county is getting purchased. I imagine property taxes are going to go up just because the property values are going to be reassessed. I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. A very good idea, but this is a bullet in your holster, not in your gun right now. We keep it. If we need to use it later, then we do. But things could change so fast. You might approve this and then next week find out we can use all sorts of money for things we hadn't thought of. So I think we just need to wait. If I could, I would postpone this and maybe just change the years to 2023 and whatever. But this is just premature to me, and I think what Clark stated in his last paragraph is absolutely applicable. We need to wait. There's too many moving parts that might affect how we're going to be with cash, and it may be very positive. We might not have a problem in 6 months. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Chair.
Gary.
Yeah, I respect everyone's opinion, but that's what this board does best, wait. And I agree that if a position opens tomorrow and it's not mandated, it's not grant funded, and that position doesn't get filled for a month or 5 weeks or whatever it takes, that's money the county saved now. If we put this off to next year, we're just sending that same old message that the county board has the inability to effectively look at the budget. I agree with the proposal. That's why I seconded it. We'll let the administrator and the county board chair say that we need it, and that's fine. But if that position opens tomorrow and it is not mandated, then we're going to save a few dollars this year. Thanks.
Clarence was up first. Yep.
I do have one question that disregards the effective date of this hiring freeze as tomorrow. We have currently, I think, 3 positions open in Health and Human Services. We interviewed last week, and we'd like to offer a position to someone that we interviewed last week. Do we have to get the approval before we can offer that position? We've got interviews with 4 people tomorrow, which the hiring freeze would go into effect. These positions have already been advertised. We've gotten applications and we're going through the process of interviewing. Do we have to hold off in hiring those positions now, and if this is approved, to get the approval of the administrator?
No, my interpretation of that, we have the same position over the Sheriff's Department. We have 2 or 3 positions for correctional officers plus deputies. My interpretation of this would be, per the motion that's on the table, which is if a position opens up, it needs to be, in order to advertise for that, it would have to go through the county board chairperson and the administrator. By definition, basically, you're saying if a position opens up, these positions are already open, you've already advertised, and so they would go forward. Any new, positions that basically a person has retired or quit, you'd have to go through this process. So that would be my interpretation of it. And again, the motion you're debating on the floor is that there be a hiring freeze effective tomorrow for positions that become open. They would have to get approval from the county administrator and the chairperson. That's the motion that was motioned and seconded.
I do support filling positions that were just described by the administrator, since those are in the works. From a finance perspective, we have our next meeting May 11th. And so what we're going to start doing is deciding what we're going to fund. The COVID money will help. The COVID money is about $3 million. In the referendum, the county asked for $5 million over 5 years. Even if we can find a use for every dollar of that COVID money, that still leaves us $2 million short of what we needed over the 5 years just to stabilize the budget, let alone be in really good shape. So any money that we can save is going to help the county in a long-term perspective. One of the things we know is we don't have the money in the highway fund that we thought we did. If the board wants to fund more road projects, we're going to have to raise a general levy to fund roads. And the more we fund roads, the harder it's going to be to do operations, meaning keeping the number of employees that we have. So we're going to have to make some really hard decisions later in this fall. The information that's put together related to a hiring freeze is going to help the finance committee from the get-go understand what positions we have, how they're funding, what they do, and if we do have to make some changes in the county with level of staffing, it's going to give us some information to look forward to the next budget. It isn't about this budget as much for the finance committee as about planning for future budgets. And to me, that information would be really helpful, because I don't know if I had to, and the administrator mentioned 6 to 8 people was in the paper, and I'm sure that's just a rough estimate, and I doubt that you've gone through this and figured out, what you would cut if you had to. But this information would help us as we go through this, including job descriptions, and things change over time with technology and services, and so those job descriptions need to be up to date too. It would help us to get to the point of making more informed decisions, so that from a budget planning perspective, we're in a better spot, and that includes how much money can we afford for roads in the debt levy versus what we're going to need for general levy to support operations and the employees.
Happy?
Oh my gosh.
make this quick. You know that if we go to this, I'm just picking the sheriff's department. They are under people. Will that affect hiring more, not say deputies, but your correctional officers or jailers or that kind of stuff? It's what's there. If there's 10 people that cover and no overtime and is that what it'll be and no more hiring? Because right now I think they're short on a lot of things and I don't think we should, but if there's a good, reasonable solution to that, I'm happy.
The motion on the table, Pepe, is that they would go through the administrator and the county board chairperson to get those positions approved for hiring. So
Okay, and that
it's covered.
wouldn't come to the full board then?
No, it would come to the chairperson of the county board and the county administrator to approve new openings.
Okay.
All right? So.
I guess as I contemplate this, I really look at whether we'll realize the savings just by doing this hiring freeze. Because the reality of it is we've budgeted them the money for the salaries and the benefits of their employees, and that's part of their budget. And there's nothing that stops them from diverting those funds that are from a vacant position into another line. So, especially if they have to do the additional work, as Clarence has pointed out, for the caseworkers, I mean, it's going to create overtime and I just don't see us having a savings unless this board is, got to look at how we fund salary and benefit lines and make that a separate part of the budget so that they can't divert it to other things. But either way, I don't see where this hiring freeze is going to do anything more than just create additional work for the administrator or whoever, and it's not directly going to show us a savings. I think it's a nice gesture, but it's not going to work. Thank you.
Do we get a second? Clarence's motion?
Yeah, you're ready to take a vote.
Okay, I just want to say that I agree with Clarence's motion that we don't want to stop any process in its tracks by putting this hiring freeze on. If we can expedite that by running it through 2 people rather than advertising for a meeting and running it through a committee, I think that's a good idea. Get this done as quickly as possible. So we have a motion and a second on the table to approve the hiring freeze with the understanding that this be brought forward rather than hold it up in committees. We will make a decision between the administrator and the county board chair. Are you ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
I'd like to ask for a roll call vote.
Yeah, it's a money item, I guess so. Roll call vote, Lori?
That would be Heather.
Corpola,
Yes.
Mika,
Mika left maybe, about a half hour ago? Okay.
Vitek,
Yes.
Huber,
Yes.
Hennanen,
Yes.
Weiner,
Yes.
Shudi,
No.
Brigg, Murdig,
Yes.
Magro,
No.
Mackenzie,
No.
Quebec,
Yes.
Quebec, Metzinger,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kabasa,
Yes.
Kinney,
Yes.
Portman,
No.
No.
Brannick,
Yes, and I want to say that I liked Kenny's idea of line by line, which positions are what. Thank you. Yes.
Hufall,
Yes.
Stendor,
Yes.
Jennings,
No.
Berlin,
Yes.
Yes.
15 yes, 5 no.
What was that count?
15 yes
Okay.
and 5 no.
Okay. Okay, moving right along to number 10, EMS update.
So this is just a continual update. The Ashland County has 2 townships that do not have EMS coverage. A group of towns have been meeting every other week since the first of the year to try to figure out a path to not only provide coverage to these towns, but also provide a more long-term solution to the whole area. I do attend these meetings. I have included the minutes from the last meeting we had on the 12th. The update from since the last county board meeting is that the town of Marengo with their ambulance services is certified right now. So they basically are covered. And the other 2 towns, Gordon and Shannon Golden, mutual aid requests have gone out so far. There has not been a dropped call, but that's, you know, just lucky that we've had other agencies around between Sawyer, City of, you know, with Great Divide, City of Ashland, and Park Falls responding to that. One of the things that I just kind of wanted to let everybody know, one of the things we're looking at, one of the solutions here is basically try to get the bottom towns down here, basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe up to 8 to go together and end up creating an ambulance district. The ambulance districts would basically, you know, have to be done by a vote, and they would basically create a cooperative agreement where they would enter into a single contract. Most likely there would be a staff and at the Station 13 house, which I think is in Gordon Township, and that would provide coverage for those 6 to 8 townships in a long-term contract with Marshfield Clinic out of Park Falls. That's one of the long-term goals we're looking at. Currently, Morris and the city or the town of Ashland are with Mellon. And the question is, you know, they have a 1-year contract that expires here in December. And so it's yet to be seen if they will extend that contract further. We're looking for a long-term solution which would provide coverage for the southern part of the county with a 10-year contract. So that's just kind of the updates. I am part of this. From the county's aspect, there's really nothing that we're currently involved with as far as coming to the board. The only time the county would be involved with this is if the county wanted to create a countywide system and impose another levy, which would be exempt from the general levy law, which would be to have a countywide EMS service. That service, if you did institute that, that'd be a new department we'd have to bring on board, and we would basically oversee, my gut guess is we just oversee the contracts, but we would be subordinate to organizations that already have Ashland. So if we started our own service, we would be back up to the city, like here in the city of Ashland, we'd be back up to that city of Ashland service. We'd be back up to the city of Mellon service and provide service to the rest of the county. And you know, right now I don't see us doing that. So that's the update I have.
Bill.
Bill wants a 5-minute break.
Yeah, okay. 5-minute break.
All right, 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10 after 11.
Are there any snacks for this 5-minute break? Just kidding.
Okay, we're back in session. Number 11 on the agenda, the American Rescue Plan overview.
Okay, so in your packet, you'll see there's a link for the NACO summary of this American Rescue Plan. We are expected to receive the first $1.5 million on or around May 10th. We got guidance from NACO concerning making sure we have our DUNS number and our SAMS number, our account numbers for the bank and routing numbers set up. They'll just be deposited into the bank. The second installment would be somewhere in May of 2022, and we have until December 31st of 2024 to spend these funds within the allowable uses. Currently, the only thing that made it into the law, and I think I've gone over this before with you, which is to respond to the COVID pandemic, its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, hospitality, replace lost revenue as a result of public health emergency caused by the corona pandemic, for the purposes of providing the government services, to make investments in sewer, water, or broadband, and to do premium pay for employees, and to transfer funds to nonprofits, tribal agencies, public benefit corporations involved in transportation of passengers or cargo or special purposes using of state, local governments. So, you know, the one thing, you know, in a normal course of fare, I would tell any organizations to shy away from using this money for basically one-time uses. That being said, I think when we adopted the referendum in the fall, we really had no idea that this was going to happen. And I would be looking towards hopefully flexibility and guidance coming from the Treasury Department and interpreted through the Department of Revenue, through the state of Wisconsin, to help us maybe provide some general levy relief for organizations and or operations which we're currently funding. Now, that's not going to help you in 2025, but it would help in the short term. So the question is, and we basically, as a department heads, we are collecting ideas. We have a Google sheet with, I don't know, maybe 50 ideas so far we've generated, which we may or may not be allowable because there isn't any guidance. So we don't have the final guidance from Treasury. And so we're basically just starting to tabulate some lists. When the guidance comes out and we vet through what is allowed and what isn't allowed, the county needs to decide how are they going to decide. So that's the decision that I have before you right now as a county board is how do you want to decide how to incorporate this money into basically uses of what we do. Within your packet, I had presented a couple things to the Finance and Executive Committee, creating a subcommittee made up of board members and our community members to evaluate ideas. You could allocate money to another entity to manage and make community contributions, basically offshore some sort of grant program. You could create a survey for the board and our community for input on what would be a priority for guidelines. The executive committee could evaluate ideas if they come in and make recommendations to the board. The full board could set broad parameters for the executive committee to allocate within the limits set by the board. As you can see, the first step in allocating money is not discussing projects or ideas. The first step is to set guidelines for how decisions will be made. The executive committee is making a recommendation to the county board that a joint committee made up of executive finance committee, so basically those two committees put together, be charged with vetting, approving, and recommending to the county board projects and spending approval for the full board. And so this is what came out of the executive committee. Their motion: move to approve the creation of a joint committee made up of the executive finance committee to vet, approve, recommend projects used for ARPA dollars to the full county board. And that's basically the write-up for that. The board should weigh in. How do they want to make decisions? And or just make a motion to approve these two committees to come to you with ideas.
This is Supervisor Ortman. I would like to approve, make a motion to approve this committee as suggested by this agenda item.
This is Supervisor Negro. I'd like to second that.
Just a second, Laura, has somebody here with their hand up. I hate to go over your head, but it did. Marty? Thank you.
Marty seconded it.
All right, Clark, you want to read the motion back?
Move to approve the creation of a joint committee made up of the Executive Finance Committee to vet, approve, and recommend projects for uses for the ARPA dollars to the full county board. So what you're basically, you're offshoring some of the legwork, investigative work to this subcommittee basically of the county board to come back to you with projects and utilizations for this $3 million over the next 2.5 years.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Matt?
Ms. Beck also has her hand up.
I'm sorry.
I don't have a problem with that being the basis of a group, but I think we should include some public and or other business entities in the county to get a wider perspective of how best to do this. I think there should be some inclusion for transparency of the public, and I also think that we should look at some specific entities and reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to join in this committee as well. I realize the larger you get the committee, the harder it is to get a decision, but when we're looking at this amount of money and this affecting the whole county, I think we should include some others to give us some outside thinking.
This is Supervisor Ortman.
Hang on, Ms. Cabet.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Appreciate that, your comments, Matt. And, you know, the county board can create ad hoc committees. This might be appropriate for the creation of some ad hoc committee. And if, you know, finance and executive want to jump into that committee, I don't have a problem with that, but I feel like it's too important just to leave to, you know, county board officials and not invite other members of the public to step in. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Supervisor Ortman. I'm open to a friendly amendment unless we want to postpone this and more fully vet who else we would include in the committee. I'm good with either way. I want to say though that I believe the second sentence under the proposal where it says we should recognize the temporary nature of ARPA funds, the second sentence says replenishing reserves used to offset revenue declines during the pandemic should be given high priority to rebuild financial flexibility, stability, and restore fiscal resiliency. That to me is the most important thing we can try to do with this money. We got no payback on any of the other roads we tried to get refunded for the huge amount of money we had to spend when the opioid epidemic was going full blast. And this $3 million, if we could find some way to get that back in the general fund, boy, it would give us a lot of breathing room and cushion to see where we want to go from there and make cuts if we need to, we could make cuts in a more humane way, or maybe something comes up, perhaps property taxes go through the roof because of this housing run. But yeah, we need to replenish our reserves. So any place we can slide this money onto this bill and then put our county money back in our general fund would be great. And I'm okay with anyone on a committee that can help us do that. But I will say this money is for the county. I want the citizens to participate if they want, but we got to understand that this is to get the county back on its feet. Thank you.
Yep.
Until we receive the guidelines from Treasury, it's not clear how much of this money we could find good uses for in the current county budget versus how much of it might have to go to things other than the county budget, because under those guidelines, we can't use it. So until we read those guidelines, for me at least, it's hard to understand the makeup of a committee. If this is something that we can pencil into our budget and have no problem using it, that's different than if we say half this money we can't use as a county, but now let's find the business community and others and work with them. So I personally would like to see the guidelines before we delve too far into a committee. And the other question is just a point of clarification. It says a joint committee of finance and exec. Does that mean all 10 members of finance and exec, which is an even number, or does this mean a subset of finance and exec?
I think the last time I counted up the finance and executive committee, there are a total of 8 people. Yeah, the duplication on there. So it is an even number. It's a total of 8 people. Obviously, the one thing you have to be aware of is, you can't create a committee that has a quorum of the county board either. So you can't even, so during these public meetings with the finance and executive committee to vet these things after the guidance comes out, every county board member is encouraged to attend. We will post the meeting as saying there could be a possible quorum at the meeting, just to make sure we're covered from a legal standpoint. But I would agree with Pat. I think we should start off with, we don't even have the guidance. I think one of the things this joint committee would be in charge of basically looking at it. And if we can incorporate it, our fiduciary responsibility is to support this organization. And if we can incorporate all $3 million into this organization and keep it stable, that's what we're going to do. It's your choice, but that would be my recommendation, because the first rule in first aid is save yourself, and this is something I think you need to consider.
This is Supervisor Ortman. If I could just have one more minute.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you, Dick. Clark, is there a way that these funds might pay for the contrivances we have to create in order to figure out where it's going to go? That would be nice too. Then we wouldn't have to really worry about the size of the committee, although we should worry about it. But we could make it appropriately sized and not worry about how much money it was going to cost us. I'm not sure if the guidelines cover, what you have to do to find a way to spend this properly.
I guess I'm not following your question.
If we create a committee to figure out how we're going to spend this money, can we charge that creation of that committee to the money we're trying to figure out how we use? I guess, will the money pay for?
Yeah. So we're creating the committee of the finance and executive committee together. The question is, are they going to meet separately from their normal meetings? If they meet during their normal meeting time, there won't be an additional expense. If they basically meet outside of that, I would see that probably as a reimbursable expense. But I have to wait for the guidance. I can't make that determination.
Very good. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Do we have a motion on the second on the floor?
Yes, you do. And I've read through the motion to create that joint committee.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the creation of a joint committee made up of the executive and finance committee to vet and approve projects and uses for the ARPA dollars to the full county board.
Dick, before you go for a vote, could I have 1 second?
Go ahead, Laura.
Charlie had said he was open to an amendment. My thought is, according to the comments that we got, if we added 4 more members of the community to include AADC, 2 business members, and 1 nonprofit member to the committee, that would give us 12. It wouldn't be too big, too small. Would that work for everyone?
That works for me. This is Supervisor Ortman.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Yeah.
I would suggest make it an odd number. And I think it might be appropriate to give the joint committee that we're forming of executive and finance in charge of figuring out how to fill out the rest of the And I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So basically there, Matt basically was talking about the fact that he would recommend it be an odd number and that the makeup of the committee based on after we receive the guidance that this Finance and Executive Joint Committee would in turn determine who should be part of that from the community, if any, if we're going to have community operations for this. So I mean, who made the original motion? Because the original motion was just to approve this.
Supervisor Ortman, I made the original motion.
Okay.
And Laura, did you second it?
No,
No,
I
Marty
think Marty jumped in and had.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the issue here is Matt and Pat have made are suggesting a friendly amendment that basically that the Finance and Executive Committee would determine if community members and what community members would be part of this committee task force. That's the friendly amendment that would have to be approved by the original makers of the motion.
I'm open to a friendly amendment. This is Supervisor Ortman.
We have a second.
Well, Marty would have to basically say he's okay with that as he
Okay,
seconded
okay.
it. Marty says he's okay with it. So basically the friendly amendment, my understanding was that the committee end up being a odd number of people and that the Finance Executive Committee task force, let's say, determine the community members, if any, that would be invited to it. Is that correct?
Yeah. This is Pat Kinney. We've got 8 between finance and exec, and then Supervisor McKenzie wanted an odd number. So to get to an odd number, I just asked him, would he be okay with the ADC director being the 9th member so that we have that odd number, and from there, that group of 9 would add more if it sees appropriate, but to keep it odd at that afterwards. Is that? Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So the question is, we would basically add Betsy Harries to the committee in order to get an odd number, and then that committee in turn would determine, you know, like we said earlier, we may spend this entire thing within the county, and if we could, that would be my suggestion, because we need to save the county. But if we find the guidance is such that we can't, then we would probably expand this task force to include other guidance, or just invite people on as we need guidance. So I think the motion would be to approve the joint committee made up of Finance Executive Committee to approve, recommend projects used for ARPA dollars with the inclusion of the director of the AADC.
Okay, are you ready to vote? So, when?
I would request that the work that's done to add additional community members into this committee is posted, and people know that this process is happening. So if they're interested, they can, you know, they can say, hey, I'd like to participate in this. And so it's not just handpicked by members of the committee. Thank you.
Are we ready to vote? The motion and a second with an amendment on the table. Clark had read the amendment to you and the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. And we need a motion to go into closed session. All those in favor say aye.
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 We're going to record and then we'll take a motion to go back into.
Okay, we're recording. I'm going to admit all back into the meeting.
Who made the motion to go into closed session? We had all kinds of them coming at me at the same time. Gary?
Okay, hang on.
Kathy Schutte seconded it.
Your body, right?
Find them?
I couldn't find them, but I think we're able to run with what we have. What? Joe, you're there. God, did you just pop in?
I hope you hire a navigator.
God, that's embarrassing. I apologize for that. All right. Roll call to go back into open session.
Need a roll call vote to go out of closed session.
Did someone make a motion?
I have a motion and a second to go out of closed session.
And by who?
Gary Murdig made the motion. Kathy Schutte seconded it.
Thank you. VTech. Huber. Is Huber present?
Yes.
Schutte.
Yes.
Murdig.
Yes.
Negro.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Beck.
Yes.
Metzinger.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Kabasa.
Yes.
Kinney.
Yes.
Portman.
Yes.
Brannick.
Yes.
Hufall.
Yes.
Stendor.
Yes.
Jennings.
Yes.
Berlin.
Yes.
Corpola.
Yes. And
18 yes, 3 no, or
And we-
3 absent.
yeah, I know Wiener is here too. He said yes. Sorry. I missed- I
This is Doreen Hannanen. I didn't hear my name called.
You were not available for the last roll call, so I assumed you had left, so I apologize.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. And Wiener?
Yes.
So Mika is the only one that is not present, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So Heather, just for a point of clarification, do you always do a roll call vote required to go in and out of closed session? In Minnesota, we don't have to do that, but
We're in Wisconsin.
okay, all right. Well, that's fine. I didn't know if it was just a local tradition or if it was a state law. All right. All right, so we returned from closed session, and for those of you just attending and for the recording, County Administrator Schroeder is retiring and turning in his resignation papers. So he will basically I will work with the county board until they get a new administrator up until September 30th. So now the county board needs to accept the resignation paper, which I have submitted to Chairman Pufall.
I'll make a motion that we reluctantly accept the resignation of our administrator.
Perfect.
Supervisor Ortman, I'll reluctantly second that reluctant acceptance of your resignation, Clark, and thank you so much for your work.
You're welcome.
We have to take a vote on this?
Yeah, you should take a
If
vote.
If I vote no, you're still going to leave.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a non-factor, but yeah, you should have a vote. And just you don't have to do a roll call on that.
All right, all those in favor of accepting Clark's resignation reluctantly, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed who would just like him to stay forever? This is nothing personal.
Nothing. No, you're gonna have to fight it out with my wife, though. It's like I like her better than you, Dick. No offense. She's prettier too. Okay, so the second thing here is, in light of the my resignation, the county board should decide how do they want to go about replacing me. And so one of the things we should do is we really didn't find a good job description. So I have put one together for the executive committee, which acts as the personnel committee for the county, to look at the job description. After that has been reviewed, what is the county board's feelings concerning engaging a professional search firm for a search for this new administrator versus having just local ads put out? And we would seek motions for either one of those items to give the executive committee direction from the county board.
This is Supervisor Ortman, if I might.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you, Dick. I suggest that we do both. We don't want to, we should open up advertisements local, and then do a search firm, and then we'll have more choices. If we can, if that's a possibility. Thank you.
Quebec seconded it. So one of the issues with it gets somewhat confusing when you have a local advertisement and then you have a search firm, because if a search firm, you engage a search firm and you have also candidates that you're considering at the same time, there is you could end up just paying for a fee that you don't end up utilizing if you end up doing that. Either case, my recommendation would be that we don't do anything until you get a job description and most likely a recommended salary. I would like to see, for me, I would like to engage and land on a search firm that they would basically recommend a salary. I can give you a guess of where I think somebody should be in this position, but it's just my guess based on comparables around us. Would the county board assign the executive committee to basically determine a preliminary range after they land on a job description?
This is Supervisor Ortman again.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you. I think we should wait till executive approves a job description, but then tell me, does a search firm also search locally? Maybe we don't need both if they're going to cover the whole range, local and national.
Yeah, they would basically, or what happens a lot of times, like say if you go with ICMA, it's a national search, you could also advertise in your local paper. It just so happens that when the people apply, they would go through the search firm, and the search firm would basically vet these. So part of what you're buying is you're buying an HR aspect of saying, if you get a whole mess of applicants, how do you search through them? How do you sort through them? How do you do this? And that's either you're going to do it yourself, meaning me or the executive committee goes through this, or you pay somebody to do those preliminary search and vetting, and then only bring candidates which, one, are qualified and probably be a good fit, back to the executive committee. So you wouldn't see all the applicants. You would see the candidates that they've vetted for you to see. You're basically buying a HR service when you pay this fee. But the first step, I think the first step is to kind of land on your job description, and then also land on make sure you have a salary range. Yep.
I'd like to make a motion that the executive committee meet as soon as
Can you go up to the microphone?
I'd like to make a motion that executive committee meet as soon as possible for the purpose of determining the job description that we're looking for the next county administrator, as well as a salary range. Also for a selection committee of who's going to decide who is recommended to the full board for that position. And also a discussion on the search firm versus local. And I'd like to see, if at all possible, a local search done after the job description and salary as soon as possible, and expand that as needed.
So we have two motions on the floor. We have an initial motion by Charlie, which was, I forget, Charlie, what was your motion?
I don't remember either. I like Matt's though, if it can be a.
You're the one who's second. She's coming up to the microphone. She has a better memory than us. She's younger.
I just take care of my skin. So Charlie's motion was to engage a search firm and also post locally. And so that was the motion.
That's right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's the motion that's on the floor, first and seconded, before we would consider either an amendment or a change. It sounds like Matt's motion is a little, I don't know. To me, it's a little bit different than the original motion. I don't think you can really amend it. I think you pretty much have to deal with the motion that's on the floor first. And then if you want to go with Matt's amendment, which would be, or Matt's motion, which would be to, seek a second for him after this first motion was done. I frankly would support Matt's motion to say, have the executive committee meet before the 11th, find a common date in order to deal with these things first out of the bat, set a salary, set a job description, and just put an ad in the paper and just put a poll in the water, see if somebody bites. That's not going to cost us anything. I'm more concerned about the time because I want to make sure we get this done in a fashion. So if you want, it'd be my preference for you to vote down the original motion and then seek a second for Matt's motion. So that way we can move on. So why don't you call a vote for the original motion, which was to basically engage a search firm and to direct the executive committee to engage locally also. Why don't we 86 that and go with Matt's motion would be my preference, but I can't tell you what to vote. You're a county board.
Can we have discussion on this?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Honestly, I prefer to have a search firm do the whole search. So when I agree that the executive committee should meet as soon as possible and they should just, find that range and everything. But I feel that the search firm should be the first thing that puts out any information. So that way we can keep a good solid process. That is something that we can hopefully carry forth with all of our job searches to make sure that we also get the best candidate for this position, and maybe to have someone who has that quirky little saying out of the box thinking. That is one of the things that most of us have mentioned is Clark came from someplace else and had these out of the box thoughts that helped enrich what we do. And I think searching for that piece in there, whether it's written down in the job description or not, I think that's the most important part of finding this person, is to find something that's going to help take us through this. Because we've got a lot on whoever's table this is going to be.
So Clark, let me understand this. You're recommending that we vote the first motion down?
It's really your decision, but I think I really like the idea of getting the executive committee to meet first and to engage them. My preference is that you engage a search firm, and if that means the executive committee meets first and makes that decision, I'm fine. But if the county board goes with Charlie, then I think I would basically start engaging search firms without even a job description, and then hopefully bring to the executive committee sooner rather than later, so we can kind of pick one to get going on this. So either case would be fine, as long as, like I said, I want to move quicker on this than waiting, till the 11th if we can.
All right, let's vote on Charlie's motion first.
Charlie's motion is to basically engage a search firm and also direct the executive committee to solidify the job description and do local advertising.
Got that? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed?
Was there a second on this?
It was Philomena.
Quebec.
Anyone opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries, thank you. If anybody was counting.
Okay, we will work with the chair of the executive committee to try to schedule a meeting, to look over that job description as soon as we conveniently do that before May 11th. That will help with the workload on the May 11th meeting too. Okay. Administrator updates.
Administrator updates. Yes, and we're winding down here, folks.
Yes. All right. So I did send out a notice the other day. So tomorrow night there is a pipeline awareness emergency response webinar, basically from Enbridge. County board members who have emails have that. If you don't see me, we did see a court case come back from the Sanborn case, which was the appellate court for the Wisconsin district, concerning the taxability of tribal owned lands on the reservation that have broken the chain of tribal ownership and became taxable on property taxes. And that case, in short, the circuit court ruled in favor of the township that they are taxable. The appellate court ruled in favor that that is taxable also. The enforcement of this to basically move to have these properties pay taxes will be delayed for 30 days per the judge's orders, in order to provide time for the plaintiffs to appeal the case. The expectation from WCA, this is a statewide issue, even though it's very local for us, and this is the one where we've spent $550,000 on settlements and $150,000 every year on settlements, and we have no way to get away from that. So it is a drain on the county cash, and we would like it resolved one way or the other. WCA fully expects this to be appealed, so there's final clarification at the Supreme Court, which could take another couple years. So we're probably still going to be spending $150,000 a year until this is resolved one way or the other. If it is resolved on the township side, those properties would have to pay their taxes and their back taxes, or the county would obviously take a tax deed on them and sell them. If it's revolved on the tribal side, those properties would be tax exempt, and we would seek reimbursement for the money that we made in settlements going all the way back to the beginning of the case from the taxing districts, such as the towns and the school districts and WITC, which would be a burden on them. So either case, it would be very complicated for you to deal with that. Health insurance, we're getting closer on health insurance. I'm going to be recommending to the finance committee a consulting relationship instead of a broker relationship, and retaining self-insurance. This is going to cost a little bit of money, but I think in the long run it should save significant amount of money and provide professional guidance for the organization that the organization doesn't have due to the lack of an HR manager. Currently the executive and finance meeting are meeting on May 11th, finance at 9, executive at 10. Public property and law enforcement meeting is the 26th at 5 p.m. And the WCA basically has let us know that resolutions for consideration for the annual business meeting need to be in by June 28th. And so if you're going to have, I would encourage any county board member that wants any resolutions that need to go through a committee, either that forest or executive or something, and then come back to the county board, in order to have a county board stamp of approval on these resolutions, we need to get that done sometime in May or June in order to get it to them by June 28th at 4:30 p.m. So I know we had talked about at the last executive committee meeting, I think the executive committee had directed me to come back with a resolution that would allow the state, change state law to allow counties to add an additional half-cent sales tax and or a gas tax in order to stabilize mandated services within county government. So I'll be drafting those up for the executive committee review, which will come back to the next county board. But if you have other resolutions, you know, that how you want to see county government or state government operate, this is your opportunity to get the rest of your 71 counties to weigh in and support you. And that's my update.
Yeah, in regards to the resolutions, Clark, if you recall, when you first came here, we had a process where we would have the resolutions out on the table when we came to the meeting, and people would sign them if they were in favor of moving forward. This is basically the same thing you're talking about now.
No, so resolutions are passed by a committee, and then that resolution gets forwarded to the county board for a vote. We don't put resolutions on the table to be signed because it's a, you know, it's not an open meeting when that happens, and the Corp Council has told us to stop that practice. So what we do is we pass these resolutions, just like we did today. We passed the resolution to well, we didn't pass the resolution. We're going to come back for the resolution on the county official paper, but that basically, it's just gets signed by the chairperson if it passes. So we don't have this signing process anymore, per the Corp Council.
Okay. Is that all you have for your report?
That's all I have. Kathy's got her hand up.
Kathy?
I'll try to help explain this resolution that Clark is talking about. At the annual meeting down in Madison in June, on June 21st, those resolutions that you're talking about.
The annual meeting is in September, and it'll be in La Crosse this year.
Yeah.
And in order to be considered as by the whole state, you need to have it in by June 28th.
That's what I'm talking about. I called it the wrong thing. So what you do is, what has happened in the past is all the counties are working on these resolutions. We don't have to start from scratch to make these resolutions. You can see what Bayfield County is doing, Iron County. A lot of the counties will have the exact same resolution that Ashland has. So they'll lump them all together at that meeting in September and say, the following counties want to adopt this resolution. We don't have to create our own. We can see what everybody else has, and is it what we're working on also? So it is helpful to do that. Ashland County has not had a resolution down at that meeting for years. And that says we have no issues up here at all that we're dealing with. And I don't think that's fair.
Okay. County Board Supervisor reports. Anybody have any reports on committee meetings?
This is Supervisor Ortman. I would like to report, please.
Go ahead, Charlie.
I attended a meeting of zoning where we repossessed, or didn't repossess, but we had to take over on tax deed a property on Madeline Island that seems like a very nice piece. And I would just like to suggest to this board that we probably not go through the same process of disposing that land like we used to. I think with some creative thinking, we can wring out a lot of money for the county, and maybe on a repeating basis. And if the county would indulge me, I would like Pat Kinney to speak on this issue, if he would, please, with what we might do with that little piece of land. Thank you.
So the zoning committee took up, I think, about a 12-acre parcel on Madeline Island at its last meeting, and it's got, I think, 300 feet of water frontage facing west. It's a nice parcel. It's got the highway along there. It certainly has the potential for development. We do need net new construction here so we can raise our general levy. So if we do sell this property and the administrator is getting an appraisal on it, it would be nice to have this developed in a way where we maximize the value of the net new construction there. Worst case scenario would be someone buys it and it sits as vacant land. We wouldn't get nearly the taxes on it. But it also has the potential for some nice, development or, something for the county or some group. So the normal process would be the administrator would bring back this to the zoning committee and we would put it up for auction. But if the county wants to do something other than that, then there needs to be some process to consider that, whether the administrator brings it to exec or finance or a different group. But it is a really nice parcel. It's literally not just a once in a lifetime, but probably a unique opportunity to have a parcel like that in Madeline Island and consider the possibilities. One possibility is if we do sell it is to work with the developer and have a development agreement so that that developer could get housing built on there. So at the very least, we maximize our net new construction. And I think if the administrator has interest in this, he could decide how to approach the board or a committee to explore those possibilities with this. And I guess I just ask the administrator, when you get that appraisal back, send that out to the board so everybody can see what that parcel looks like and see if there's interest in looking at something besides just simply putting it up for auction.
Yeah, well, certainly, this is a big enough piece of property that I think the board should weigh in. The main gist of this basically is it had been on the tax rolls with an appraised value of $495,000. They've been trying to sell it. In my discussions with the real estate agent, I think it might be worth around $200,000 and $225,000. So still some money, but not the $495,000 that was on the tax thing. That's why we basically are getting an appraisal before we take the next step, which is to figure out what are we sitting on? Are we sitting on a $250,000 piece of property or a $400,000 piece of property? And then we'll go from there. In discussing with the zoning administrator, one of the things that you do see, there is not an awful lot of appetite on the island for non-water properties. The inland properties are not very valuable because they, well, frankly, it's really expensive to build out there. Think about hauling all your stuff out there. And I mean, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you're probably going to spend it only for a waterfront property. So one of our evaluations would be how much we get to as a single piece, and somebody make put up a really nice, gorgeous sunset looking house, or would 3 smaller lots with 3 smaller homes generate more property value, as Pat had alluded to. So all those things would have to be considered as we go forward. And also, those of you on the recording, we currently have a state auction for our properties that we're selling, and I think that ends on the 23rd. So look upon that. It's on our website on the homepage, and we're hoping to sell some of those pieces of property. We're getting better response than we did before, so I'm very excited about this state online auction.
Thank you, Clark. Okay, we're about ready to adjourn here. If you guys have any vouchers to turn in, or do that before you leave. Nothing else on supervisor reports. Mike? Motion to adjourn.
Berlin, Mike. Berlin, motion to adjourn.
Pepe? Second?
Who is the second?
Pepe Kabasa.
Pepe seconded it.
All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Your head examine and say no.
All right. Thank you, everyone.